Very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. In today's topic, we're going to be covering everything practice management, and this particular webinar has been approved for CPD credits, and it's approved for 1.5 hours of CPD credits by LSO and 1 hour of CPD credits by Law Society of British Columbia. So we welcome our friends from other provinces outside of Ontario as well. And I kindly, once again, just for housekeeping, do request you to mute your phone lines and use the chat window. And I know I've said that a few times now. I'm going to stop saying that, and let's get on with our presentation and talk about our webinar for today. Everything practice management. And what we've tried to accomplish is basically take the Law Society's guidelines, bookkeeping guidelines, as well as policies and rules, and we've kind of broken it down into these essential subtopics. Okay, so it's kind of easier to consume, just to give you a flavor for what is to be expected or what is expected out of you as a legal professional in Canada across these various provinces based on your jurisdictions, the obligations that you have to the profession across these different silos of subject matter expertise, right? So be it client intake, file management, up to personal management as well, covering between financial, business, professional, and a bit of time management. Now, what's expected out of you is obviously a certain level of authenticity when it comes to bookkeeping, record keeping, financial, documentation, but the guidelines also talks about in the audits that kind of use, the audits are a means by which the auditors and the Law Society is able to track and understand whether you as a legal professional are very much in line with what's expected, right? That's the way that they can actually examine, if you will, for lack of a better term, or put to test whether you're doing the right things that you have to do. It's the sole purpose of the audit, from what we've understood and spoken to auditors and others in the society, it's not a sole purpose to find fault. It's really to find a bit of a method to the madness in how you're dealing with certain things that you're expected to deal with. And obviously, if you're not in line with what's expected, depending on the severity of where you are, the Law Society is looking to guide you back to where you need to be. Okay, whether through that's a follow-up audit or otherwise, the audit is a means for them to understand where you are in your path towards being a very compliant and successful legal professional, and they judge that going down the right path across these several areas. So we'll focus and look at each of these areas, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's entailed in delivering these requirements. Okay, so we'll start with client intake, service, and communication, and we'll go one step at a time across these 7 different obligations that we've broken it down into. So if you really look at the client intake, service, and communication, so it's almost a fundamental step as you as the legal professional, invite and service your customer. Almost your first step, if you will, of interacting with that customer, whether it's a prospective client, like a ghost client, whether there's a real client that's actually retaining you or willing to pay you for your service, right? And if you further break down the different obligations and kind of spectrum of areas of focus within this client intake and communication, let's start with part of the obligation truly is that you do everything that's required to have a detailed recording of all your calls and consultations. Depending on your strategy or marketing strategy or other strategies of client intake, you may provide free consultations. You may entertain the opportunity for ghost clients to call you for a 15-minute phone conversation. Now, if that individual provides you with his or her information, address, first name, last name, then obviously it's your obligation to record that, and depending on whether they retain you or not, categorize them accordingly. Okay, if they actually give you a lot of information but they never come back, they've just kind of flirted with the idea, then you're still obligated to store their information as a ghost client so that it's further used for conflict screening purposes. Okay, but the fundamental and what's expected out of you is that you provide a way to record these calls and consultations in a detailed manner. And as we spoke about ghost clients and otherwise, we talk about conflict checking for confidential information as a very logical next step that is expected out of you as you run your practice. Okay? And what this conflict checking should allow you to do is kind of scan through your files. Now, if you're just getting started in your practice, obviously it's a lot more easier to really know whether this individual you've dealt with before. But if you've been in business for a few years and you've maybe dealt with various different silos of areas of practice, then you do obviously need a mechanism, a platform, whether that's through software or through just a manual process, an ability for you to conflict check that individual and his or her situation with any previous touch points that you may have had. Okay? Once you've done the conflict check, it's still important that you document it. The Law Society has a very pretty form that you fill out that outlines whether you determine them to be a conflict or not, and if not, what is the situation now? Why is it not a conflict? Have you retained them? Have you passed them along to another legal counsel? So those are some of the detailing that you still are required to keep record of, and it's something that may be asked during your audit as part of your compliance. These are documents that are important. Whether they ask you or not is purely determined on the day and on the auditor. Okay? So let's say you've actually taken this client, recorded the client intake form, so you've basically taken down their first name, last name, their address, maybe their phone number. You could take down their email. The Law Society obviously looks for you to get a communication address, which is very important. You've done your conflict screening. Kind of the next step in the process, obviously, is for you to be very clear and transparent with outlining your collateral for fees, right? So really establishing, as a legal professional in this area of practice, how do you determine to ask for your fees for the services that you will be rendering. Now, depending again on your situation, whether that's a retainer letter or whether that's an engagement letter, that's again a way for you to communicate to your client about your service capabilities and your fees for that service that you're going to deliver. And the retainer letter or engagement letter can be as elaborate as you believe it should be. The more the better, so that it's clearer and there's no conflict of interest. People are not coming back saying, this is not what I expected. It's where you would put in your fee schedule if you have one. You could talk about how you determine to raise invoices, whether that's through a flat fee, or are you going to be charging on a time and material basis, or is this a contingency fee-based matter, right? So you truly, based on the matter itself, the file, and the area of practice, and obviously based on your experience, you probably want to establish those rules that govern fees associated with that service upfront through those documentation. So yet another documentation for you to keep in mind is through that retainer or engagement letter. And the reason I say retainer or engagement letter is, let's say there's no trust money involved, okay? So you don't have to deal with trust, and you're just going to go with the leap of faith that this individual would pay you as you raise an invoice for the work rendered. Then that would more or less be an engagement letter, which talks about, I'm going to charge you $150 an hour, and I will charge you as and when I go about completing my job. Or it could be an engagement letter which says, you know what, for this particular POA matter, it's $500 flat rate, everything included, and I'm going to bill you one flat fee rate at the end of the work done. Okay? So it really comes down to the flavor that you offer as a service in the area of practice, but there's the documentation that's important both for you as well as for the Law Society that you've gone through that process. Fourth step, as we think is important, let's assume that there is a retainer involved, there is trust money involved, and you're taking that retainer in. it's very important that you deposit that money. Obviously, that's money you're taking in advance. That money of retainer be deposited into your trust account, not your general account, but be deposited into your trust account. And more importantly, that you provide them with a receipt. It's a best practice guideline, okay? There's obviously a lot of our experienced legal professionals in the industry have shared across various platforms and in-person seminars where they've had to deal with horror stories where clients have come back saying, that's not what the retainer I paid you. It was not $100. I paid you $1,000 because of the fact that a retainer receipt was never signed off or provided. Just to avoid those levels of confusions, you want to be very clear in providing receipts, whether that's for a payment or even for a retainer that's just getting started with all of this, right? So deposit the money, if it's a retainer, into your trust account, and do find a way to provide them with the receipt of having accepted that payment. And last but not the least, if things didn't work out, either ways, whether it's your client non-engaging you, but you should also understand that you have every right to non-engage your client as long as the rules and regulations and the reasons are well outlined. And if you do that, you need a mechanism again to elaborate as to why you're non-engaging, or otherwise understand from your client as to why he or she is non-engaging you, or the party is non-engaging you, and document that as well. Have it signed so that all parties agree that you as the legal professional, through this non-engagement letter, are no more responsible for that particular service or the matter that was being dealt with. Okay? It's very critical. Many times, because it's not the scenario that we always like to have, many times these scenarios are overlooked. And those are the types of scenarios that auditors and the Law Society is looking to be very particular about and keeping tab on. Okay, so as long as you have a process, especially the one that allows you to document all of this information, I think you're going to be just fine. It's going to be smooth sailing on rough tides. And, as long as you have in mind the different rules and regulations and the boundaries that you have as a legal professional, as long as you understand it and ensure that you have the appropriate documentation, that's all there's required. Okay? So very high level, when we look at the client intake process, service and communication all combined into one area of an obligation, these are some of the very high level workflow, I would say, or steps that you have to keep in mind. And again, keep in mind that there's a process and a documentation for each of those steps. Okay? I think there's a really good question, a question about whether the engagement letter has anything over and above the retainer letter. I think, as I explained myself, I was just looking to differentiate between the retainer letter being that one of a trust being involved and I apologize, and that of an engagement letter being one that does not have a retainer. So that's the differentiation I was trying to establish. But between these two letters, depending on the situation, the information about the service levels should remain to be the same. Okay. So let's go one step further. We spoke about some of these documents, but just to outline what these documents can potentially look like, there's quite a few in number. Just to that point that I was talking about, but some of the components that you want to keep in mind as you draft those retainer letters or engagement letters. Most importantly, the nature and scope of the matter. Okay, so you truly want to outline whether this is a POA, HTA, small claims matter, this is a criminal matter, a family law divorce matter, what's the Wilson estate, whatever the nature of that and scope of that matter is. You want to outline that well within that retainer/engagement letter. Very important, and this is something that we put in purposefully, which is the client's responsibilities. So as much as you want to outline the responsibilities that govern yourself as the legal professional, I believe it's equally important for you to outline through this engagement retainer letter, I'll just call it a letter for simplicity, out of this letter, as the obligations and the responsibilities that your client has. A good example that I always provide is clearly establish the terms of and conditions that govern your payment schedule. So for example, if you've determined that your client needs to pay you with 15 days of you raising an invoice, or maybe 30 days of you raising an invoice, you want to outline what those responsibilities are, the different mechanisms of payments, and if they don't pay you within those 30 days, then what are the consequences? What is the interest rate? Is it 18% annual, or however you want to divvy it up, or 1.5% monthly? You want to establish those well ahead so that make sure your client goes through it, he reads it, he understands it, and he's well prepared to act on it when comes time. Okay? And right from scheduling, course of representation, another very important aspect to it is outlining your method and frequency of communication, whether that's going to be via mail, email, etc. Okay, what are your retainer arrangements? For example, if you're going to get an initial $1,000 retainer, do you have a plan or a scheduled plan to say that you would request or require a top-up to that retainer, anytime the retainer comes below $200? So we have a lot of legal professionals who do that, again, based on the nature of the scope of work. If the particular retainer comes below a certain amount, then they do ask for a replenishment or a top-up. Okay? Termination details. We spoke about the non-engagement clauses, so you want to ensure that these are all the clauses that govern what that termination looks like. If it comes to that. Confidentiality agreements, and we always talk about any risks associated with a certain voice of communication. Email, for example. It doesn't hurt to go out of the way to provide that and talk to them about it, because that is the day and age that we all live in today. Okay? Alrighty. So we've kind of just touched upon and kind of hopefully given you a bit of an overview, if you will, of all the obligations and important aspects of those obligations that you want to keep in mind when it comes to client intake, service, and communication. Now we move on to the next obligation that I've outlined as part of those 7 different obligations, that being that of file management. This is yet another underappreciated, overlooked, if you will, component of the obligation. When we all start off our legal careers, we're obviously very excited for what we do, the work that we're going to be doing, and how we're going to represent our clients and win this. The back office work, the file management work, is not necessarily the prettiest of work that one expects to do, but unfortunately it is a part of what you do and what's required out of you, whether it's you doing it or whether you hire individuals to help you with it. Regardless, this is something that's expected out of your firm, as representing you or your individuals, colleagues representing your firm, right? One of the first things that we talk about, or the obligations within the practice management realm talks about, is the ability to have a way of checking for incoming matters. We spoke about conflict checks, ensuring that before you create that matter, you've done conflict screening. Okay. And once you've created that file, here are some of the things to keep in mind, components of that file management to keep in mind. The Law Society always talks about having separate files for each respective, or file numbers. I'll go one step further, say separate file numbering system for each and every matter. And this also applies to whether you're dealing with the same client. Now, I've said this before in other webinars. We've had situations where we've heard during a seminar a legal professional actually having the same file number because it's the same client across different matters. This could be a small claims, slip and fall case, and could be a real estate deal. All those individual matters, even if it's for the same client, require a separate file numbering system, because the characteristics of those matters and what's being dealt with can all be different, right? One file may actually have a retainer, the other file may not. And so it's very important that each file, regardless of matter, but even if it's for the same client, has its own numbering system. And keep in mind that as you number and arrange those files, that they be chronologically available and available to you in a very secure and, if possible, in an electronic fashion. Being electronic is not a mandated rule. It's just a best practice, again, given today's day and age, keeping in mind that if you do only solely depend on hard copies, then it might not be the best thing to keep in mind. You always want to have a fallback. As much as you have digital copies and have hard copies as a fallback, I think it's kind of the other way around too for many law firms. Ensuring that as you have these file managements available, that you're pretty much having a process to record each and all of those client interactions within that file. Okay, whether you manage it all within the realm of that file or manage it based on the file number and manage it elsewhere, that's fine, as long as you have a way of relating these two together. And last but not the least, it's important that you have a way of organizing these files so that you can easily search for them. So it's all cross-indexed so that when you search for it, that you're able to retrieve that file right away. We did a survey of, I want to say, about 14 to 16 months back, where we realized and we got results back that legal firms spent a good majority of their time on searching for information. And that was mostly file information, whether it's due to change in personnel or not having proper file management numbering systems. Search and retrieving file information was one of the top areas where time was spent. And especially if you have a conflict screening, you want to make sure that that individual's information is cross-indexed across all different matters that he or she may be available, or the party may be available, right? So if the party is an additional party in a different matter, if you were to create a file, a brand new client matter for that same party, you want a way to find out that you've already dealt with that individual in another file, right? As a plaintiff or a defendant or whatever the situation may be. Searching for that, one at a time across all your files is really what's going to lead to you wasting a lot of time in searching for it, right? So if you have a plan of ensuring that the file numbering is going to be unique, chronological, secure, and allows you to cross-index and easily retrievable, then you've set yourself up for success. Okay? So we spoke about client intake. So just dream the dream with me as we think through this in our mind. Where the first step is the client intake. You talk about the service and communication, SLA, if you will, of what you're going to provide to your client. Document that. Provide them with the appropriate receipts for any retainers that you may have received even before you get started, right? Sign all the appropriate retainer engagement letters, every agreement that you need to get signed, so that both parties are very well versed in their individual responsibilities and what is expected out of this relationship. And then move on to your back office work, which is file management. Ensure that you create a file that's chronological, sequential, or secure, and you can easily retrieve. Now let's move on to the third component. Let me do a quick recap for those who just joined us. We're talking about the 7 different professional obligations under everything practice management that are expected by you to keep in mind as you prepare yourself to provide these documents on a need basis. So we've kind of looked at client intake, file management, and we're going to move into the financial management. Okay? Very interesting. Definitely not every legal professional's cup of tea. But I think with the advent of technology, with the advent of a lot of these CPDs and a lot of these sessions that you would attend, you would realize that it's not, as fearful or as scary as sometimes it may come across. As you think about financial management, one of the fundamentals we spoke about during the service and communication is to really understand, as a service provider, a proper fee schedule. So even before you get started or during the process, at some time as you run through your legal office, you want to revisit or determine, depending on your situation, what that fee schedule looks like. We have legal friends who actually have divvied up fees based on the areas of practice because they've done those silos of practice so many times. They know what works, what does not work. It's not great to do a billable hour in such matter. It's probably great to do a flat rate in such and such matter. So the area of practice and your experience are two important components that are going to help you determine what that fee schedule should look like, right? Once you have established as a company, as a firm, as to what you're going to charge your clients, it's important that you have, through these different letters and different documents, them outlined, right? You want them outlined, and you want that to be communicated well to your client. Now that you've communicated to your client, it also is a great habit to be communicated internally within your office or your firm. Because the last thing you want to do is have another personnel in your team bill a client a billable hour when it was an all-in flat rate. Okay, so you don't want a bit of lack of communication to, have you look bad in front of your client. So setting those fee schedules is very important. Internally communicating, and if you're a sole practitioner, then it's yourself. Remind yourself of that. But then internally remind your team of the fee schedule for those matters, and record the time as and when it happens. Whether you build them or not, you're going to build them later on. Record things as and when they happen, and find a way or a mechanism or a process to do so. Okay? Perfect. So you've determined the fee schedule. You found a way to capture these dockets or disbursements as and when they happen for your client. Fantastic. The next very important step is, I think there's a few questions about file management, which I'll get back towards the end after I finish this off right off. Once you've actually done that, you've docketed your events, your billables. Let's say you've a couple of disbursements in. It's very, very important that you actually promptly raise an invoice to your client. Now, there could be two specific reasons why you want to raise an invoice. Both those reasons have one underlying reason, and that is invoice is considered to be the legal document that outlines or determines the effort that you have serviced your client for. Whether it's by the time or by the hours or by dollars, the invoice is a mechanism for you to clearly illustrate to your client the amount of money that they owe you in whatever shape or form. One could be where you had a retainer, and let's say you had a retainer for $1,000. You've just done your first meeting with the client, and you're going to charge them at a $200 rate per hour. You just finished up a 1-hour meeting. Maybe it's in your retainer letter that you would actually be doing interim bills as and when it happens. So maybe it's your responsibility now to raise that invoice for that $200 plus tax, or maybe not tax, depending on, again, your income situation, right? But it's important that you raise that invoice. What that allows you to do, it frees up that specific $200, which is your eligible trust amount or trust transfer amount. Once you raise that invoice, you can clearly communicate to your client that out of that $1,000 retainer that they provided you, you're now going to retrieve or transfer that eligible $200 or $226 from your trust account into your general account. Okay? That's one fundamental reason if there's a retainer involved. You need that invoice for you to even do that. The second is a very simple example where there's no retainer involved, and it's a pay-as-you-go. You're going to raise an invoice as you complete your tasks, right? So the same concept of a $226 bill, you send it to your client so that they know that it's now their responsibility that they receive that invoice, that they pay for it, based on your terms and conditions, obviously, but they know for sure through that document that there's a particular service fee invoice that needs to be paid. Okay? So invoicing them on time, prompt, depending on the schedule that you've set up. Very, very important step. What's also equally important, a little caveat to that, is ensuring that you've outlined the time, the details. The devil is in the detail. So ensuring that you've got all those details in the invoices so that it's very easy, less confusing for your clients. The last thing you want to do is go back and forth with your client on an invoice that they quite didn't understand, right? Perfect. Now you raised the invoice, and it's a 30-day term of payment. From a financial management perspective, what is expected now for you to be smart about is have a mechanism or a systematic approach to track these accounts, these payments, whether they're getting paid on time, whether it's a due, overdue on the scheduled pay time, right? So it's very important that you track the accounts receivable, whether that's money sitting on the table for you to do the trust transfer, or whether that's money that you're waiting for your client to pay you. Recording these transactions or general accounts to receipts and disbursement entries, very critical. So let's say you had a disbursement, a court fee or an application fee. It's important that you track how much that fee was for, who was it paid to, how did you pay for it, what the amount was there a tax component to it, or was this tax exempt? Some of the other components of your financial management that is critical are maintaining bank statements and books, any canceled checks if applicable, and also duplicate deposit slips. As I said, these are some of the nuances, devil in the detail, that is very important to keep in mind as you plan your financial management. Last but not the least, and this is something that we added beyond the obligation, and it is part of a bit of the obligation, but more so from a understanding your firm's financial health, is to ensure you have proper financial statements for your income, expense, profit and loss, etc. Okay? Always keep a tab on the firm's health on a timely manner so that you're not catching the problem at the last minute. So to answer a quick question that we had about one of the file management components we spoke about, the question truly is there a specific best practice for numbering a file? I can give you a good example. One of the fundamental components is that every file be unique, okay? So you don't get confused between having the same numbering system for same files. One of the things that we've done with the uLaw is always hashtag today's date and time to generate a unique number, and that's appended with either the company's name or the individual's first name, last name, initials. That's one quick example that comes to mind. We have other companies that, or clients, that use the number of that matter. So if this is 2018 and this is the fifth matter in January, even if it's for the same client, maybe the fourth and fifth matters was for the same client, they would name it as 2018-Jan or 01-05. Okay, I've seen those two examples in my limited experience. But obviously, you want to come up with the file numbering system that you can remember. You want to automate it because, trust me, after a point in time, you would lose, you lose touch of what the numbering system looks like. Okay. I hope that answered that question. Just elaborating a little bit more on the financial management, some of the documents that are expected out of you as part of your audit, as part of your record keeping or bookkeeping, the client ledgers, very important, both trust and general. Again, if you're only dealing with general, then that's all you have to provide. Equally important are the receipts and journals. So trust receipts, general, trust disbursement journal, general, okay? And last but not the least, your monthly trust comparison, or what they call reconciliation statements, okay? What we recommend at uLaw, being in this industry now for many years, is if you are to provide the general ledgers and journals, then go that extra mile and reconcile your general as well. It's not only good for your books, it's equally important and good for your firm's financial health, because that really gives you a general reconciliation on a monthly basis, truly provides you with the insight about where your firm's standing from a financial health standpoint. Okay? But at a very high level, and we'll talk a little bit more later on, but at a very high level, these are some of the very, very important documents that you want to keep in mind as you run through these documentations for your audit. Alrighty then. Moving along to the business management capabilities. Okay, so again, a quick recap. Sometimes it's that time of the day where either my tone or just the subject matter may put you to sleep. If I have, please wake up. If I haven't, thank you very much. Just a quick recap on what we've been talking about. We talked about client intake, service and communication, file management. We spoke about how important it is to number them appropriately, easy to search, right? Financial management, what it is to ensure that you are setting your fee schedule, docketing and disbursing on time, raising invoices on time, doing the trust transfers so that you're making your money, accepting client payments, having a way of tracking where these payments are so that you have either your assistant or yourself making those phone calls, those hateful phone calls to get that money, but equally important for you as an entrepreneur and a business owner. Okay? So we're going to focus on business, professional, time, and personal management. So we've just finished financial management, and I'm moving into my business management. From a business management perspective, obviously you as either an entrepreneur, sole practitioner, or someone who's just started a firm with a bunch of friends, legal firms, right, across various shapes and forms, are equally important that they have, I would say, the acumen for being a business owner. Okay, so it's a legal business, nevertheless, but it's a business, and it needs to be managed. And some of the areas that you want to keep in mind that help you automate those components of business so that you can then focus on what you do best are the use of the appropriate software, important software that's important for you across every life cycle touch point of your business. When we talk about legal software, what we talk about that are legal accounting, practice management. These are two common words I'm sure you've come across, whether you're just completed, you're an articling student, or you're a seasoned campaigner. You've heard of these two terms, right? Legal accounting, practice management, file management, case management, etc. What I want for you to take away is focus more on the legal accounting and practice management, because accounting is a very important component of that business management and also the management of monies, whether that's trust or general, that you deal on behalf of your client. Okay? So you have the added responsibility of not only dealing with your own money, but also dealing with your client's money and ensuring that it's properly managed. That's all there is to this game. But with the advent of technology, you're not alone. There's help, there's software that can help you through this process and can help you be systematic and automated so that you're letting the software do the work for you and you're doing the work that the software doesn't do, at least till date. Okay? That's litigating, going to court, thinking 50 years from now you're probably going to have robots do that, but hope not. But till then, let's put the software to use where it's best suited. Keeping in mind as you manage your business, as well as business or just financial accounting products are equally important. If you've heard of many other financial or what we call as business accounting software, so that it can allow you to manage your own business, your expenses, your HST, your taxes, your income tax, right? So you're managing a business, and if you have employees, you probably want to manage their salaries, etc. As you consider these software and consider these automation, you want to keep in mind that you keep security as one of the key components and key determining factors. Ask all the pertinent questions to the vendors that you're exploring. Ensure that they're secure, especially if they're cloud-based. How do they manage files? Or if you are planning to do this all in a very manual way, ensure that you are well adverse with how you would actually go about doing it in a secure manner. If you're determined to do this manually, make sure that having backups on a regular basis is important. Okay? We've heard of cases where your laptop crashes and that's the end of all your files. You don't want to get in that situation. If you're doing this manually, if you're not letting software do all the automation and backup, then please keep in mind that you have to do that, and please do it. We spoke about the advent of technology, with anytime, anywhere becoming a very common term used across all businesses. All marketing jargons use anytime, anywhere, any place, right? And you as a legal professional, in fact, should start using that and use technology as an advantage to tell your clients that you can be assured of legal advice anytime, anywhere, and I would use any device, right? Jokes apart, with the advent of technology and the expectation of this 21st century consumer being that you're always available and you're responsive, you're not waiting to get back to work the next day to answer that question using your desktop-based Outlook or docketing it using a PC-based system. It's great, but you have to find flexibility around how you can make that work for you if you were to have access to it in a robust, secure, mobile way. Okay, so you could still have a PC-based software, but again, either find the policies that govern how you would go about serving your client, or if the expectation of your client is that you respond in time, find a way. And there's other mechanisms today that allow you to access your desktop-based systems remotely as well, and you can do that as well. And that's kind of really my next segue, is remote access. Whether it's your PC-based software, cloud-based software obviously provide you access to information anytime, anywhere. But if you have invested in a PC-based software, then please do at least understand what are the advantages that you have if you can find remote access to that system, remote access to your emails, especially voice messages as well. Software like RingCentral that we use at uLaw allows you to access voice messages. And if your client left you a voice message, RingCentral will send you an email saying that your client, John Smith, just left you a message. This was someone who is not your client. It would just give you a number. So there's levels of automation that you can provide. Having access to information in your fingertips is only going to make you that much more efficient. And I love you to be that 21st century legal professional that's expected out of you. Okay? So do the research, talk to your friends, invest in the right software that's required. Legal accounting, you never go wrong there. You definitely would require business accounting. If one package can provide it all, even better. Regardless of whether it's a desktop or cloud-based, explore the cost, the advantages and disadvantages of all of that. Do your research. Ask all the pertinent questions to your vendors. And then be prepared to be a 21st century legal professional. Alrighty. So we've kind of covered some core components of business management, and we'll jump into So I think a quick question is whether we encrypt data. So we don't encrypt data on the REST side, but we definitely do encrypt data. The other way around. We do definitely encrypt data on the REST side. On all our service, data is encrypted. Which is HTTPS, which is secure and encrypted 256-bit encryption. Okay. But if you want your client-side encryption, whether if you need that, you are now able to invest in extra encryption methodologies and technologies as well. You can also encrypt your Word documents. You can encrypt PDF documents. You can password protect it. So there's a lot of tools that are already free and available that give you that flexibility. Professional obligations. Very important. We talk about CPD hours as one of the obligations. I believe it's about 3 hours of professionalism hours that is required by every legal professional in Ontario, at least that I know of. So you participating in today's webinar is very critical, a very important first step that you're doing towards that obligation of you being a professional. Fantastic. There's other sites. We offer at uLaw at a minimum 1 CPD webinar a month. So in total, at a minimum, you're guaranteed with us 12 CPDs. Not that you would need it, but we try and make it as informative as possible. Some of them may unfortunately be repetitive because of the scale that we need to cover. But there are other sites that are obviously provided to you at a cost. We charge you nothing for these sessions, just your participation. Beyond CPD hours and completing those required hours, we've found that having associations with memberships, whether there's local societies, it could be based on jurisdiction, it could be based on many factors, right? It could be based on ethnicity, it could be based on the profession itself. The legal profession has a lot of these associations and memberships that provide you with the support that you require, whether it's a conversation with a friend in a very similar situation, whether it's about legal business, or it's just about talking about life, being a legal professional, whether that's discounted software that these memberships can offer you to support, insurance. There's many advantages to being a part of a membership. It's not mandated, it's not most required, but if you can, try it out, and I'm sure you would find ensure that you would find benefits out of these memberships. Okay, makes it possible for you to be part of that profession, if you will, or that society. A very important obligation, and I think this is a must for you, regardless, is ensuring that you're reviewing new legislation and case laws, right? So you want to be top of your game. So you certainly want to ensure that on a very constant basis, you're reviewing all the policies, legislations, case laws, so that you are a well-informed legal professional. Reviewing professional conduct guidelines. So this is a very sensitive topic, and it's a big topic. In fact, in today's context in Ontario, I believe there was a recent survey that was done by LSO that found that I believe almost this was the latest news around the harassment and discrimination on articling students, and I understand that the Law Society of Ontario would be looking at kind of really revisiting some of these policies about how they govern or how they measure professional conduct, right? I think this was part of a larger review, and this is something that came out. So it's an important article that you can Google it. It was, I think, came out today or yesterday. Almost 5%, or 1 in 5, in fact, actually had comments about gender, race, sexual orientation, or discrimination based on any of these topics. So professional, conduct guidelines is a very critical component. As a practice management or a legal accounting software company, there's only so much we can do, but it's something that for you to keep in mind and be aware of as these things change within your jurisdiction. Okay. Alrighty, time management. Many times when we come down to this, it may sound cliche, because it truly is. You've had the best of the best, the most advanced and knowledgeable individuals write books and talk about this on a regular basis. So we're not going to beat the drum on this concept of time management. But we've always considered these three critical, and this slide remains to be the same, but we've always considered these three components to be very consistent to our legal friends. Okay? First thing is that depending on, again, your business and area of practice that you focus on, we often find that legal professionals need to manage multiple things at the same time. Okay? There are multiple files, there are multiple clients, all need to be dealt with at the same time. So there's a bit of a multitasking that is very critical as part of this overarching time management as a concept. So one of the things we suggest and we recommend, and we have it as part of our product, I'm sure there are other companies who do that as part of their product too, is ensuring that you have a way of task management and a to-do list. So if you can manage that, whether you practice management, or whether you use Evernote, or whether you use any task management product, or if it's manual, or if it's an Excel sheet, have a process to ensure that you have a task list or a to-do list that you can ensure that you're managing multiple things at the same time. And you check them off as you complete them so you don't have to worry about the ones that already have been taken care of. Okay? That's just our humble request and recommendation as part of the time management. It's one of the things that the professional obligation bookkeeping guideline talks about too, is the fact that you may end up managing multiple files, have a process to deal with that situation. Another segue we found out of the fact that you manage multiple files is an easy way to get away from having to deal with closed files, whether that's searching for information, which I mentioned to you was one of the top time contenders. A lot of the time in law firms were taken away for searching of information. Now, if you had a process of just categorizing or classifying your files, right, then you can then spend lesser time searching and more time serving your clients, and hence having a category called active files as an example, or it could be current files, could be any term, allows you to quickly bifurcate which files are important, which are closed, which are then only dealt for conflict screening. And if you're searching for some active files, it's available to you faster than if you were to search for the whole laundry list. Okay? And the third important aspect that we found, again, within the time management boundaries, specific to that of legal friends, is many times the non-billable time is something that's overlooked, whether that's work done as pro bono, so very important. There's a lot of work done as pro bono, and we recently collaborated with the Law Society to write an article that they wrote on pro bono and how important it is to track that. So including pro bono dockets that are free to your clients, to as well as the administrative tasks that you take to manage your firm, it's very important that you have a process, whether it's manual or software-based, that gives you that insight so that you can review it on a very constant basis and take actionable next steps to either do really well if that's what you're doing, or correct yourself if that's not working for you. Okay? So these are kind of the really, so the quick question is, can uLaw give us a list of all active files? Oh, most absolutely yes. The product allows you to categorize files based on the status, and it's only the active files, or we call them closed and archived, that we let you search on. Okay, so if you're only searching on archived, then all that there is. And the quick answer to the administrative uses is yes. I definitely don't want to take away the crux of today's conversation to a demonstration, but we're going to be demonstrating that in an upcoming webinar. The quick question is, does uLaw track all your administrative effort? We do have a way of tracking it, yes. All right, so please do keep in mind, task list, managing a way of just dealing with active files, and then ensuring that you're tracking your non-billable time. Some takeaways of time management, and if you're already doing a good job of it, great job, okay? All right, it's time to do a final recap. So we've spoken about client intake, file management, financial management. Again, these are very high-level topics, eh? We want to leave you with a taste for what's expected. We conduct webinars on a weekly, monthly basis, just focusing on each of these individual topics and what you can do to stay on top of that. But this is just to give you a flavor of what's expected. Last but not the least, we've covered financial, business, professional, time, is personal management. Okay. This is a very critical component of the guideline, believe it or not. There's not much said about it, but I'm sure there are a lot of sessions, webinars that have been conducted specific to personal management. It is a very stressful job, as we've heard from a lot of our legal friends. It's stressful from many aspects. The fact that you're dealing with money, number one. The fact that you're dealing with someone else's money. And the fact that you're dealing with someone else's money and someone is actually looking over you and is going to find you. And if for some reason, unfortunately, was not misappropriated because the opportunity presents, then that you're just convoluting your situation. So there's a lot of situational pressure points that leaves this profession to be a bit stressful. But the fact that you still do what you do best, so kudos to you, and the fact that you're already here means a lot more. But keep in mind, as you go through this process, go through this journey, as things come and go, clients come and go, you still need to stay afloat, and you need to find ways to manage your personal time, to give it to whatever is important to you in your life, whether that's family, friends, whatever that's important to you beyond what you do as a legal professional. Because if you're not satisfied being who you are and what you do as a professional, then you obviously are going to find other things to do. So it's great that you're here. It's important to have satisfaction in this job, in this profession, this career, but it's also equally important to find growth, progress, and financial success. I think that's a cliche, and it's a given. But how do you accomplish it is the important aspect to it, is by ensuring you have a process, whether manual or automated using a software, to track, measure, and react to the situation. So if you're not tracking the revenue you're making, if you're not tracking the area of practice in which you're making that revenue, if you're not tracking whether your last month was a loss and the last 6 months have been a loss, so if you're not doing all of that, you can't blame but yourself if at the end of the year you find that there's no money left in your business, right? As an example. So find a way, as hard as it is. I mean, people shy away from money. I think today's technologies are really allowing us to be a lot more braver with dealing with money, facing it face to face, if you will, and reacting to it in a way that's meaningful to you. So track that progress, measure that progress, and I'm pretty sure you're going to come out as a winner by reacting and taking the right step for success. Okay? And the reason we talked about time and then personal management is a lot of that is to do with spending time for personal work, whether that's doing yoga, that's taking vacation, whatever it takes to relax your mind so that you can put that energy back into your job, that stressful job that you need to come back to, do it. We believe it's going to pay off. Okay? So having that proper work-life balance, accomplishing that, we believe would truly leave you with a way to deal with stress management, which is just part and parcel of your job. Okay? And this is kind of the last slide we wanted to leave you with today. Knowing what you know from everything that's expected out of you as a legal professional, right? All those obligations, all that work. And on top of all this, what we didn't cover is what you do at court, right? The true work of a legal professional, being able to represent his or her client or the party's client at court, doing that job. One of the fundamentals that you probably were educated on that we didn't even cover. So over and above that, there is so much more that you have to do, back office, dealing with money, etc. If you can find peace at finding and doing that appropriate research to find a software to accomplish some of these tasks for you, then you're saving yourself that much more time so that you can then put it back into whatever is more important, saving that time to maybe serve more clients, which probably would lead to more revenue, right? Automating tasks so that it can lead to more profitable revenue. Understanding areas of practice where you're performing well so that you can take that saved time and money and invest in marketing. So automate many of these tasks, and practice management combined with legal accounting makes it that much more simpler for you to assess monies. So if you're collecting HST, which is part of your practice management, and if you're paying HST, which is part of your business management, how awesome would it be for software that can take both HSTs and give you a report that tells this is the HST that you received and this is the HST that you paid, and hence subtract the two. That's the HST either you owe the government or the government owes you, right? That's just an example of what a software can do. Again, it's not to replace what you already don't know. It's just a way for it to be done faster so that you can then take those precious time that you have to do other, more efficient work. Total cost of ownership can be optimized, right, by reducing the overhead costs. You bring more efficiencies into your practice, as I said, that can then be brought to either manage more clients or spend that time to do other introspective work, making your firm better. The question is it 1.5 hours for LSUC professional? The answer is yes. You go to their website and you apply for that. We did apply for 1. We got 1.5, so we have to tell you it's 1.5. We're looking to get that corrected to 1 hour because we kind of feel a bit odd and obligated to be talking for an hour and a half. But on a Friday afternoon, we probably don't want to do that. So we spend 1 hour, but we have been awarded an hour and a half. Okay. And last but not the least, we spoke about having a software that can be compliant so that you're not thinking about it all the time. The software is doing that for you. Makes it that much more simpler. And the ability for you to practice anywhere, whether it's a desktop-based system, whether it's a cloud-based system, find a way to access information from anywhere, anytime, because that's going to leave you to be very agile and be that 21st century. I keep saying 21st century, but I don't even know what that term means anymore. The modern legal professional that you are expected to be, right? It's a competitive edge, believe it or not. Having access to information and being able to provide responsive answers faster it's all about the reputation. Reference is one of the leading source of contact and leads for legal professionals. So if you can leave that taste and reputation with the last client that you are an amazing, responsive, got the job done kind of legal professional, then these are things that you need to keep in mind. Okay? So I believe the question is, what is the name? The name that you need to provide within your Law Society portal is Everything Practice Management. The company's name is uLaw Practice. The one thing I would recommend is we have sent you an email which has a quick, it gives you the ability to give us your name and information because this is a CPD. Kindly do use the link that we've provided to mark your attendance. This is a pretty large audience today that we're serving, so we kindly request you to either mark your attendance using that sheet or just send us a quick email that you attended because sometimes if the Law Society were to come back and ask us if you did, then we have proof to show that you did. We will be recording this entire webinar and we'll make that available to you on our YouTube channel. So that will be available to you early next week as well. So once again, thank you very much for everyone who joined us today. And if there's any questions, please feel free to send us an email to support@ulawpractice.com. Please do send us your comments and reviews about how we can do this better, other subject areas that we can talk about, and we would be happy to serve you in that regard. Once again, thank you for joining me today, and I hope this was a time well spent and an informational session. and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.